like a brief intro, so that tells who you are, so we can just dive right into it.
Cool.
Good morning, Charles. Welcome to the show.
Thanks a lot, Norbert. Very good to be here. Thanks for having me.
It ended up great timing because literally 2 hours ago on the dYdX Foundation Twitter feed, you published your 2022 ecosystem report. So that gives us quite a bit to talk about. Fantastic material. And one of the let's start with the basics. So you're the CEO of the dYdX Foundation, and so how do you separate or define the responsibilities of the foundation vis-a-vis the rest of the ecosystem?
Yes, absolutely. That's a great question. So, if you take a step back, essentially the dYdX ecosystem is going through a transformation. dYdX was founded in 2017 and has been started in the Ethereum layer 1, later build a layer 2 with Starkware, which is a version 3 you're using today, and essentially the application has been slowly evolving into becoming a protocol. And these two keywords are very important. An application sits on someone else's infrastructure, and a protocol essentially become more some kind of a full stack with an ecosystem which is rich of users, builders, and people just building on the top of each other's. So the foundation was created in 2021, and really our mission is to enable the dYdX protocol while working together with the community, the builders, the protocol builders, the application builders, and essentially being an active member of all these different work streams, working around open source software that is dYdX. So that's really our role today. We've got essentially employees of the foundation being part of many different work streams and positioned in many different markets, essentially to be close to the builders, because making sure that the governance is also active, and that all the voices and all the community kind of expectations from the protocol are received and discussed and progress well. So that's how we operate at the foundation. But it's really, I would say, crypto in its form. It's really community driven. We've got different venues for the community to express and to discuss. Twitter is one of them. We've got obviously forums. There is also a very active community on Discord, and depending on their topics of expertise or focus, people will meet each other and decide to build things with the support of the dYdX grants, for example. So we build with the community a DAO a few months ago, which is the grants DAO at dYdX. And today the community essentially votes and manage and helps the ecosystem to leverage this new platform within the ecosystem. And there is also the Ops DAO, which was voted by the community a few months ago, which is essentially building. It's still under building right now, but the operations around the dYdX DAO ecosystem in general. So it's a new way of operating protocols. And it's really fascinating. To give you a sense a little bit of the size of the exchange today, this is public information. Roughly speaking, we kind of observe about $1 billion of volume daily on the dYdX exchange, which places us within the top of the decentralized finance exchanges. And dYdX, as a reminder, is dealing with a specific subset of market, which is perpetuals, which are essentially futures contracts with no expiry date. So they refresh themselves along the way.
Thank you. And so for you personally, you've done quite a few interesting things throughout your life, but just prior to dYdX, you were at ConsenSys, and so you made the move in the middle of last year, become the CEO of the dYdX Foundation. And I assume, right, you had multiple options on the table and you chose dYdX of all these options. So can you explain a bit kind of your decision-making process and what really convinced you that this is where you want to bet your career?
Absolutely. I'm really deeply passionate about blockchain technology in general. For quite some time, I encountered Bitcoin back in 2011. I was also an early user of Ethereum and spent some time and decided to essentially leave my job at the Hong Kong government. At the time, I was head of fintech to join ConsenSys and later join dYdX. So it's really, I would say, a commitment and a true passion for the blockchain technology in general. What really caught my attention within dYdX is the use case of dYdX. DeFi, decentralized finance, is a very proven use case. There is a product market fit over there. There is a global demand for decentralized finance in general. We are still early, but it's definitely getting traction and growing as a topic. The opportunity also at dYdX is to explore what we call the DApp chain narrative, the decentralized application chain. So when an application is big enough to build its own chain, and this is what we are doing with the version 4 of dYdX, where dYdX essentially is evolving to a new iteration. The new version of dYdX is called version 4, and it will be built out of the Cosmos SDK, and essentially we are building our own blockchain. So it's a blockchain which is dedicated to our use case, fine-tuned for exactly what we are doing, with a set of validators. And it's very interesting in terms of technology to be part of this kind of new evolution of the industry, moving from the early days with a single chain, Bitcoin, then having, for example, Ethereum, which is enable the smart contract capability to a blockchain, and then exploring essentially big enough applications so that they can essentially afford and get and having a use case for building their own chain. So the DApp chain narrative is another way, another reason for me to have decided to join dYdX. And then dYdX is building also on the Cosmos ecosystem. As I mentioned, the V4 is built out of the Cosmos SDK using the Tendermint consensus mechanism. So that's also a new technology and some kind of new rabbit hole for me to explore. So I think these three things really sum up some of the reasons which eventually drove me to join the dYdX Foundation.
So there are quite a few moving parts, both on the technology side, but then also on, say, the governance side or the legal structure side, which then the DAO is a new representation of. Let me just dive one level deeper on the version 4, because you are in the middle of it right now. And so what has been accomplished so far on the version 4 roadmap, and what is to expect for the rest of the year and maybe into early 23?
Sure. So the version 4 is essentially being built right now, and it has reached the second milestone out of 5. So the latest update allows the planning team to forecast private testnet to be launched by the end of March, a public testnet around the summer, and a mainnet launch within Q3. So that's what has been communicated a few weeks ago now. And essentially, it's really like rethinking and rebuilding and upgrading the full protocol so that it can keep delivering in terms of performance and fee management, making sure that the experience for users of the protocol is optimal. So obviously, increasing the throughput. Making sure that there is also very efficient markets being defined. This version 4, and also building the chain. That's a very big kind of endeavor. Not having your application sitting on a general purpose and public chain, but having your chain, which is essentially operational and fine-tuned for your use case. So it's all progressing well. I think when you build something of this scale, you want also to be cautious and making sure you test and retest everything which needs to be. So that's why we will be going through the various cycles of private testnet and then public testnet before a mainnet launch. But everyone is extremely excited. The community is really super of this new process, and everything is progressing smoothly.
Now that's quite a step change, right? Going from the level 2 with Starkware and the ZK rollups to your own blockchain. In that transition, is there a migration, or is it simply closing down everything on the old market and reopening contracts on the new market? How do we have to imagine that?
Sure. So a lot of things are still in the making, and I think the testnet, which will be kind of opening in the coming months, will give us more clarity. But eventually, we aim at having a version 4, which is launch and having a version 3, which will very quickly essentially sunset, so that everyone can essentially meet within the version 4. It's a lot of work from the engineers to make sure that the experience is as smooth as possible. A good product is designed in a way that it will not show you always too many details that you will not care too much. So I can tell you that a lot of things are happening in the back end, and we want to have an experience for the users which is as smooth as possible, and making sure that from V3 to V4. But I think there is a will from the product teams involved to get like very low fees, or if any fees in terms of trading, and making sure we can still offer the best liquidity on the market on decentralized exchanges.
In a way, you're a victim of your own success, right? If you weren't that successful and the volume was lower, then it would be much less riskier migration. But with $1 billion daily volume, you need to be very careful. Do you expect or in which way do you expect the ecosystem to change? So everything that's around version 3 right now, will there be new components, new players, new roles in version 4 that need to be maybe still shaped or invented even?
So our ecosystem at dYdX will be changing quite a bit with version 4. It's really expands the number of stakeholders around the protocol, and the foundation is one of them, and there is many. The users, the market makers are obviously the original stakeholders, but with building the dYdX chain, there will be also kind of operators of the chain or active members of the chain itself. So we need to also welcome validators for the blockchain, which will be part of the new ecosystem. There's one very big difference with the version 3 is that running your own chain means a lot of validators and a much larger also community of developers. Version 4 is planned to be totally open source, so people will have the freedom to essentially build and being creative out of this source code, and making sure that it keeps operate as a protocol, but also integrate this protocol within some of their product, and the community and will define a lot of this along the road. But we will probably see some new trends out of DeFi kind of surfacing at dYdX, and also obviously in many others DeFi major players. I think DeFi is keep iterating, and we'll probably see more and more some kind of hybrid embed. We will probably see DeFi being embedded in a hybrid ways much more, and people thinking of these global protocols as part of their backend or potentially part of their offering. The same way you see some centralized exchange today offering centralized products, as well as decentralized access or access to decentralized product as well. So I guess we will see more and more overlaps between the traditional finance and crypto, and within crypto, starting to see also more and more overlaps between centralized crypto and decentralized crypto. And that's really interesting. And this all enabled by kind of philosophy of open source software and thinking of composability and permissionless access to essentially new digital infrastructure.
So at the intersection of the centralized finance and decentralized finance is then also the organizational question of the DAO, right? So in centralized finance, you've got clear structures, you've got registered companies, you have a jurisdiction that derives from that, and the DAO in that way is still pretty experimental. And so where do you see that ultimately going? Because it needs to be squared up. Something has to give, right? Either we need adjustment in the traditional legal system, or kind of the DAO concept is illegal almost, like it's not quite workable in the current legal structure.
So DAOs are not illegal today. They're extremely new format of organization of societies and humans in general. But there is plenty of states in the US as well as countries in Europe which are comfortable with DAOs, but it's still new. I agree with you. I think in the background, what we are witnessing is really a migration from our societies from a bureaucratic age to an algorithm age. And we see algorithm all around us today. The social media you're probably reading every day is essentially driving content via an algorithm to you. The stock market, where your equities or maybe some of your FX exposure are driven by algorithm for the most part. So I think it's very important for us to acknowledge that and essentially as a human species thinking how we get the best skill to survive in this new environment. And DAOs are essentially the best way for us to organize ourselves at scale. The internet has been able to distribute data at scale and connect us at scale, but not yet organizing ourselves at scales. And that's probably what Web3 means to me, at least. It's not only the NFT and the metaverse, but thinking, okay, what kind of tooling the new generation of internet is bringing to us in order to keep thriving in the new digital society we are part of today. And this concept of DAOs, decentralized autonomous organization, is, in my opinion, the best way for us humans to coordinate and to get organized at scale, at global scale. And DAOs are a really good illustration of that. So it's still new. The dYdX DAO has been progressing, so we have already great essentially coordinating work with a committee on how to fund projects and teams which are impactful on the protocol itself. The OpDAO, the operations DAO of dYdX, has been approved and in building phase right, help essentially to coordinate a lot of the work from different contributors to the ecosystem, and that's really important. So in my opinion, see DAOs the same way you see Bitcoin. Bitcoin took 10 years or so to be a well-known brand globally today. I think you can ask anyone, do you know Bitcoins? Most of the people today have heard about it. And I would not be surprised if in the next 5 or 10 years, people will be comfortable with the concept of DAOs in multiple different contexts, and probably regulators also will be very comfortable with it as well. But it's a very powerful tool. It's still a little bit early. Many people are experimenting, but a lot of those DAOs are already in great momentum, and there is a lot of extremely bright minds working and activating this.
Now, obviously, we have let's say, two different legal systems around the world, right? We've got the Anglo-American, which is the case law and can basically do anything, and then ultimately it comes to a lawsuit and the judge decides what is right or wrong. And then you've got the like the German, the Japanese system that really has the law written down, and with that you have existing legal structures that are either individual persons or they are legal persons, and it can be limited liability company or it can be a partnership, but then also has implications to who's ultimately liable and to what extent, and also how you actually can contract and enforce a contract with that entity. And so that is when I talk about it still being experimental and trying to square this up. I fully agree with you that, especially for the younger generation, I'm getting old now, but like the younger generation that grows up fully digitally, the DAO feels completely natural. But this legal structure of whom do I legally contract with, that is still really undefined in my mind.
Give it some time, Norbert. If you think about it, in every single country, should it be an Anglo-Saxon countries or some other places in the world, you always have probably between 10 to 25 different kind of company structures available, where the regulators and the lawmakers have made their kind of their mind and clarify what are the capabilities of these kind of structures, and DAO essentially will come later on. I think we should not always reinvent everything, but we should definitely kind of invite to the digital world some of the old structures. So if you think of a co-op where there is different people bringing and building a company together because they are all doing the same thing, this can be one way. If you think of a fund, a DAO can be also a new type of fund, so people kind of pool money and decide to invest or collect NFTs or invest in different projects. As I mentioned, co-op, I think, is an interesting one. You can have also DAOs which will be aiming at non-for-profit. So DAO is more a generic kind of definition for like digital framework for getting organized. And I foresee that countries will either embrace it very quickly as a concept and being kind of a wrapper for all the different existing entities they have, and saying, okay, if you want to operate an LLC or if you want to operate a fund in a digital manner, you can operate it on paper, or you can also operate it on as a DAO. And maybe some others will decide that the DAO is totally different. So it's still progressing. There is many different views, but today there is, I think it's coordinating millions of different people around the world, around projects, and it's definitely the tooling, the world of digital asset and crypto needs. So it will keep progressing. Yeah, I'm thinking of the state of Wyoming, which is very comfortable with DAOs now and considers them with a lot of clarity. And there is always some kind of early movers and followers later on. And today, entrepreneurs also take the decision to essentially operate their business where they get the clarity they expect.
Yeah, not to say that what you're doing at the technical side is simple, but I think the technology is ahead of all the other structures, right? So that needs for. I think the UK also went out and starting to do a survey on DAOs and smart contracts and what it should mean, and clearly looking to carve out this early mover advantage. But maybe that's something that needs to be addressed at the whatever G7 or OECD level, because clearly you're transcending the nation state. So a single country might not be able to capture that.
Absolutely right.
The other aspect of that, especially in running a futures market, essentially, is that we have financial regulation. And so how does that fit together, and what are the implications even in the way you're running today?
So the foundation does not run any activities. We're really focusing on the community and the software essentially. So we don't operate anything. It's some other companies will essentially decide to leverage some of this software and make sure they operate the right way. But we don't operate any exchange or anything like this.
So let's maybe to round it out, go back to what you started to develop in terms of the future of DeFi, this hybrid model and so on. So how do you see this evolving, maybe also across different sectors of financial services? Clearly, you're with dYdX, like a financial markets, capital markets, futures markets specialist, but in the same way, these concepts also, right? Especially since you also talked about co-ops. Insurance used to be a co-op business, basically, and so decentralized insurance feels like something that could happen also very, very soon again. Where do you see kind of the attack vectors evolving?
I think the next big step is so we've seen the first wave of innovation in DeFi with the exchanges and some of the crypto assets. I think the next big step, or the next maybe catalyst, will probably be central bank digital currencies, CBDCs, which essentially is a kind of blessing from central banks on the blockchain technology, and using blockchain to essentially mint and distribute their domestic currencies. And we have already signs that this world of CBDCs and DeFi will probably at some point overlap. If you think of some of the POCs between the MAS, the central banks of France and Swiss, where they were starting to use essentially automatic market makers to exchange swap CBDCs, so essentially forex type of transactions. I think this is a very big market where there is a very big need, and you can easily essentially automate further and get more transparency and more market efficiency by leveraging public networks, blockchain networks to enable further the FX market. So I think that's a very big one. And that's the one FX, everyone needs FX, or many people need FX because people are traveling and there is still so many currencies around. So I think we will still see this progressing, and we will see some of this early experiment in DeFi, such as the lending protocols, the exchanges protocols, or the swap protocols. All these kind of basic financial activities. We will start to see this experiment in decentralized finance becoming public goods via the involvement or the participation of central banks and commercial banks in general within these protocols. So the central banks and CBDCs come to mind. I'm thinking also of some initiatives from some investment banks starting to leverage DeFi for some of their operations. Société Générale, a French investment bank, has been doing, I think, his second loan from a decentralized finance lending protocol called MakerDAO a few weeks ago, and we're talking about dozens of millions of US dollars of value over there. So we will see more and more of these use cases where essentially the overlap will keep expanding, and probably the real world assets starts being represented into the world of decentralized finance and crypto. Will probably also at some point reach a critical size and being meaningful by just bringing a more optimized and more efficient flow around digitalization of real world assets.
The key question on markets is always liquidity ultimately, right? And so we've seen obviously over the last 30 years or so a consolidation in traditional stock markets. So there's only like 2 or 3 groups really that are left. And with the ability now to innovate for anybody to create new markets, and especially you're taking it one level further from going from version 3 to 4, as you said, you becomes open source, so anybody can take it and iterate further and experiment with new things, and some of them will clearly stick, some will fail, and that's how innovation works. But it seems clear that we're entering a stage of, I wouldn't quite call it a Cambrian explosion again, but we're going back to a stage where you get many, many more markets, and some of them will be technically good, some might be not technically that appealing, but maybe they have the liquidity. So it's like always in innovation. I don't want to go back to the videotape example, but that really outs me now as an old guy, right? So the more liquid market might win, and maybe not the technically the best one. But ultimately, how are we sorting out across these hundreds of ideas what's going to be good? Is this just kind of let the market play it out?
I think you're perfectly right here, Norbert. We are really into this exponential age where innovation is kind of firing in many directions, and I think the market will essentially be the final judge here. What is very interesting with the crypto public goods, essentially, or crypto networks, is they are proven to work. They've been going through a lot of systemic risk and shocks. Think of the big collapse in various projects, which have been giving a big hit on this kind of networks and DeFi protocols. And if you look at the FTX drama, for example, we find out that essentially the DeFi protocols have all been made whole, and all of them get their money back because it was just programmatic finance, and the risk was measured and controlled all around, and eventually the centralized crypto was more of a black box, but the asset itself and the infrastructure around the asset was working as it was originally planned, and working very well despite very, very stormy conditions. So I think the crypto markets are bringing additional value. They operate 24/7. They are highly liquid. If you look at the top of the asset classes in crypto in general, and they're operating for quite some time now. Bitcoin is 10+ years old. Ethereum is operating also for more than 5 years, and a lot of people are building upon them. So it's really an era of composability, of global infrastructure. So we don't have this silo of an exchange in Asia, a leading exchange in Asia, in Europe, and a leading exchange in the US. We start to look at, okay, this is just a global marketplace. And I think just by bringing this basic value proposition, that some asset class are just global by essence, and those market infrastructure are transparent, permissionless, so you can access them in any way you want, is just a very strong value proposition versus some of the existing infrastructure. So I don't think the change will be radical. I think it will take many years, but we can also be looking at this in a very optimistic manner and thinking maybe there will not be so much kind of move from one platform to another, but the pie will be expanding big time. So that's also I think very encouraging and certainly super energizing.
I was just thinking we clearly have some different personalities here. You're clearly the optimistic side, and I'm more on the pessimistic side, and that's why you're in your role, and that's why it's a great role for you. But so especially kind of in the globalization aspect, I'm probably more the glass is half empty type, because I feel like even looking at the internet, we were splitting into different parts, right? The US and in Europe is GDPR, and China has been separated out anyway. And so especially when you talk about CBDCs, it feels like it might be going a similar way, where since the Second World War, we've been living in this US dollar dominated world that was divided until the Berlin Wall came down and was truly just US dollar dominated. And that has been really weaponized, right, with all the sanctions. Now, sanctions are nothing new. They happened hundreds of years ago, but it feels like this technology also allows to essentially create a counter force to that operates outside of this US dominated system. And so we, rather than being unipolar, become at least bipolar again, if not multipolar. And that doesn't mean that there can't be bridges between kind of these segments, but my pessimistic view just sees this a little more fragmented than just one global market.
That's good to have different opinions, and honestly, I'm excited to hear your views and trying to counterbalance things. The way I look at this also is those technologies are creating trust where there is not necessarily trust, and they can be trust bridges. So we can think of a trust bridge or a trusted platform between different countries if they have like a lot of topics to disagree on. But having available and bringing to our societies, should you be in North America or in continental Africa or wherever, public good and global networks which give you free access of communication and essentially possibly running some of your business or anything like this. I think it's a great contribution in general to societies, and bringing this kind of trustable digital infrastructure, I think it's very impactful. We don't see it immediately, but it means a lot when you are into one place of the world and your maybe your banking system is coming with a lot of very strong rules, or maybe when you are in one place of the world and your central banks is misbehaving and essentially swiping maybe your life saving and your retirement is gone within a few months because of some really bad behaviors or mismanagements. I think making available some alternative for the people to choose is really impactful. Not everyone will be jumping on this straight away, but it's I think it's just additional choice, and it's neutral choice. It's something which was not available before, and that's why it captures so much excitement, so much passion. Some people will be passionate in a very optimistic way, and I'm probably on this camp. Some others will be skeptical, but they are on their way as well, and some others will be pushing back. That's really maybe sometimes how innovation and technology make its space within our societies. Everything is remember the internet. Back in the days, people were saying it was only for bad activities and hackers, and nowadays we live with the internet every day, and it's a tool for us to work and to do many things. So all of this is progressing, and there is early adopters and soon joiners as well.
Yeah, and I don't think it's entirely black and white, and I think I'm like 75% of where you are. It's just like this.
Absolutely.
Last quarter is a bit more the skeptic in there still, just from what's going on globally. But there's no doubt. I think what you and dYdX are building is super exciting, and just kind of not standing still, right? Being on version 4, and these changes have been step changes, tremendous value add in kind of the version 3 and the fundamental revamp in version 4. So lots of exciting work. And so if people get excited now hearing this, how can they get engaged with dYdX and become part of the journey towards version 4?
Excellent. Thank you for that. So I really invite everyone to check on the dYdX Twitter account, dYdX Foundation Twitter account, the annual report of the ecosystem. And it's going to give you a really good view of who is part of this ecosystem, what have been the main achievements of 2022, and what we are all aiming at building for 2023. So Twitter, dYdX Foundation, we are on Discord, and on the website you will find also many other ways to be in touch with the ecosystem in general, dYdX.foundation.
And you're hiring as well?
Yes, we are hiring, absolutely. There is 2 positions open now, and I'm fairly positive that the dYdX DAOs in general will be hiring soon also. So if you are looking for testing the futures and experimenting with the dYdX protocol. There is openings at the dYdX Foundation and probably soon also within the dYdX DAOs. And if you are an entrepreneur or if you have projects, we also have a grants program via the DAO, the dYdX DAO grants. And it's essentially helping people to build either adjacent products to the protocol or to get different initiatives. So make sure you check this out and leverage the expertise and the funding available over there.
Super. Thank you, Charles. Fantastic conversation. And we'll surely follow what's happening in 23. And as you travel the world and propagate the dYdX gospel, I'm sure we see you back in Tokyo at some point as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Norbert, for having me.
Super. That was great. Thank you so much. Really
Thank you so much.
So cool.